Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today's lesson is going to be on perimeter and area. Now, we've used the term area in the past when working with multiplication, and I hope that after today's lesson you'll see why that makes sense. And I hope this will be an easy enough topic to understand because as far as I can tell, it should be quite straightforward. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is perimeter. And perimeter is the total distance around the outside of a shape. And so I've got a bunch of shapes up here. If we looked at this triangle, for example, the perimeter would be the length around the outside of the triangle. So if this was 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters, the perimeter of this triangle would be 3 plus 3 plus 3. 9 centimeters. All right. If I had a look at this square and I wanted to find the perimeter, I would look at the total distance around the outside of the shape. If it was a square and each of these sides was 4 centimeters, what would the perimeter be? Well, this leg would be 4, then 8, then 12, and then 16. So the perimeter is equal to 4, 8, 12, 16 centimeters. All right, and the same applies for any shape or anything that you want to talk about. The perimeter is the total distance around the outside. And in order to find that, we just add up all of the legs of the exterior of the shape. So if we had an example with a rectangle, and a rectangle will be slightly easier, or slightly different I should say, because all of the sides of a rectangle are not the same. If we look at a rectangle, we always know that the sides opposite each other will be the same length. So if this is 4, then this one will also be 4. And if this one is 2, then this one will also be 2. And now to calculate the perimeter, which is the total distance around the outside of the shape, we would say that this line here is 4 centimeters or 4 units. It can be any unit of measurement. It could be 4 kilometers. As long as you keep it the same in your answer. But for now, we'll say that these are in centimeters. So this length is 4 centimeters plus 2 centimeters plus 4 centimeters plus another 2 centimeters. So this will be equal to 4 plus 2 is 6. 4 plus 2 is another 6. 6 plus 6 is 12 centimeters. All right. We sometimes get given an example when there is a missing value, or maybe even 2 missing values. If I gave you another rectangle that looked like this, and maybe we should try one with decimals now. If this length was 0.2 kilometers and this length was 0.6 kilometers, what would be the total perimeter of this rectangle? Well, because this width here is 0.2, then the width here will also be 0.2. If the length here is 0.6, then the length here must also be 0.6. And now all I need to do is add all of these up. 0.6 plus 0.6 is 1.2. 0.2 plus 0.2 is 0.4. And if I add those, I get my total distance as 1.6 kilometers. Now, the thing that we can take away here is that when we're working with perimeter, and for these examples, we'll only use the perimeter of a rectangle, but for all of these examples, we just need to add the length and breadth together, and then we get the answer. So if you wanted to come up with some sort of way to solve this, or a formula, what I would say is I wouldn't use a formula regularly to find the perimeter. I would just add all of the sides. But if this is the width and this is the length, the perimeter will be equal to the width twice plus the length twice. All right, so 2 times the width plus 2 times the length. All right, or the width plus the length 2 times. All right, so as long as you know the width of a rectangle and the length of a rectangle, you can quite easily find the perimeter by saying 2 times whatever the width plus the length is. So let's try an example with just this formula. If I had the width of a rectangle as 2 and the length as 8, my perimeter would be equal to, P is equal to 2 times the width, which is 2, plus the length, which is 8, which is equal to, well, we do our brackets first. 2 plus 8 is equal to 10, and 2 times 10 is equal to 20. Now, I don't want to encourage you to use this formula unless it makes absolute sense for you and you know that the order of operations needs to be followed. But you could use it if you felt very confident in it. If you don't feel very confident in it, that's fine. Please just add all of the lengths and widths together and you will find the perimeter, because the perimeter is just the total distance on the outside. You can use your number sense to figure that out. All right, if you're feeling like a little bit more advanced, you can try and use this formula in order to help you solve these problems. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is area. And area refers to the total space taken up inside of a shape. So if we looked at our rectangle again, the area would be the total space inside the shape. All right, and if I looked at the square, it would be the total space inside the square. And if I looked at this circle, it would be the total space inside the circle. Now, we're not going to worry about any of these shapes today. We're going to talk again about the rectangle. Now, how would we find the area inside a rectangle? And this should be quite easy, and it should come as no surprise to you that this actually works out the same as multiplying, because we use the area model when learning to multiply numbers. If I looked at this rectangle here, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4 units long, and it was 1, 2, 3 units wide. How could I find what the total space in this area would be. Well, if we turn this into blocks, it all seems to make sense. In this first column, I get 3 blocks. So for this 1 unit, I get 3 units of area. If I add another unit in my columns, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I have 12 square units. All right. All I did here was multiply 4 by 3. All right. The formula for finding the area of a rectangle is area is equal to length times width, or length times breadth as it's sometimes called. Or sometimes length times depth as far as I'm aware. Now, all we did here to find out this area was say 4 times 3. Okay, and what we're doing actually is saying is I have 4 columns of 3 rows. How many blocks will I get altogether? Well, we know that 4 rows of 3 is going to be equal to 12. This is why we use the area model to teach multiplication, because it makes sense in the real world situation. So if I used a real world situation to come up with a question, maybe this would make some more sense. If I took another example, we have a rectangular shape. Now, what comes in a rectangular shape? Well, I know that picture frames come in shapes that are rectangles, usually 6 by 9. 6 centimeters by 9 centimeters is a picture frame shape that we often come into contact with. If my shape, or my rectangle, was 6 centimeters by 9 centimeters, how many square centimeters? And a square centimeter is a centimeter that's in a square shape that is 1 centimeter long by 1 centimeter wide. How many square centimeters would fit into this shape? Well, I could split this up into 9 columns and 6 rows, and I could count them all. Or I could just say, well, I know how my multiplication works, and 9 times 6 is equal to 45. So the area would be 45 centimeters. And now this is something that's very important. If we're finding the area, our units will always be in centimeters squared or kilometers squared or units squared. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but the rule is whenever you multiply something by itself, we call that squaring a number. Okay? And so anything times itself is that thing squared. And you write squared with a 2 to the top right hand corner of it. It's called a superscript as far as I'm aware. So we have the area is equal to 45 centimeters squared. It's because we have centimeters, 6 centimeters times by 9 centimeters. We get 6 times 9 centimeters times centimeters is centimeters squared. All right? It's not super important that you remember where it comes from or why, but when we find area, the units that we're dealing with are always squared because we're working in square shaped units. All right? Now, if I had to find the perimeter of this example, it would be, we'll just use P as our symbol. P is equal to, well, this length is 9, so this must also be 9. This is 6, so this must also be 6. All right? 9 plus 9 is 18. 6 plus 6 is 12. 12 plus 18 is 36. centimeters. I added all of those things together. I didn't multiply, so my centimeters stay as normal centimeters. They do not become centimeters squared when I'm dealing with perimeter. Okay, now again, this is the formula that we've used in order to solve this. We know that the width is the shorter of the sides and the length is the longer of the sides. And by multiplying the length and the width, we find the area. Now, you don't need to memorize this formula as long as you can use your number sense to find how many blocks would be filled into the shape. And you do that by multiplying 6 by 9. If you have to draw some lines and divide this into 9 columns and this into 6 rows, definitely do it. See that you would end up with 6 rows of 9 blocks or 9 rows of 6 blocks, and use that to practice finding out what the area is. The formula is a nice tool to use, but it doesn't help unless you can see where the formula comes from. So practice a few examples drawing the pictures, and practice a few examples using just the formula, and see what's easier for you, and see if you can figure out for yourself what the best formula is to use and why that formula is good to use. All right. Thank you so much for watching this video again. I hope this was an informative instruction for you on perimeter and area. For the moment, we'll only be working with rectangles and possibly squares. But good luck for your questions on this, and I hope to hear from all of you with any questions or concerns that you have and anything that I can help with. I hope you guys are all doing great. Miss you guys. Bye.